as far as this particular example, we have black and blue. Now, we mentioned that conflict arises when there's two of the same color in any given area. But normally what you're trying to do, and we haven't mentioned this too much, but in a situation as this, and since blue is not there, does black, in being the king, collect for the blue or the blue temple there?
Yes, that is an important point. In fact, we have not mentioned that. There is a rule in a normal kingdom: when you play a tile into that kingdom, then the leader of that color will score. Now, what happens if that leader is not there? Then the rule says the king will step in, and the king will happily take that point. But that only applies for instant tile placement.
Oh.
It does not apply to monuments, and that's very important, because otherwise the king would get such a dominant role, and it would just be too easy to make scores. So in order to have the big monuments there and profit from them, you really have to fill this position. So it's not just the king deputizing for it. That is a bigger role, and it needs a full-time position in inverted commas to run that.
Okay, so I would have to get that blue potter back down there if I wanted to collect on the temple or on the monument itself. But
and
if I'm laying tiles, I can collect the point.
Exactly. Now, you can be dead sure, because there is not yet a blue leader in that kingdom that at the next possible turn, a blue leader will appear there, because without the conflict, the leader can just take this position, and from then onwards can collect all these nice blue points. So there will be quite a struggle once the leader is there, that some other leaders, either blue or black, will try to come in and take over the income from the monument.
And especially from somebody who has not their blue leader on the board at all yet, would probably be very likely to move it there.
Absolutely. That is exactly where the scoring system brings the focus. You need to look at your scores. You need to see, where am I weak? And you do not look at the board and say, where are the best scoring opportunities? You look at your points and say, where am I weak, and therefore what do I need to do to improve my weaknesses? And players who see that they are weak in black or in blue, as you say, of course will see that as a major opportunity for a long-term income in their weakest colors, and therefore really to boost their overall results.
So in this case, the blue, and nobody can score without having a leader on the board. So in this case, probably the blue bull would move into that area, and of course there would be no conflict, right?
That's absolutely right, yes. I think what we just discussed about making sure that you have control of a monument is already more a global strategy, but it still comes out of the motivation of local conflicts. That means those conflicts where you simply place a leader into the kingdom and then match up the color of another leader in that kingdom, and therefore you need to resolve that through religion, and you look at the temples in your neighborhood, and you can place more temples from your hand, and whoever keeps the upper hand stays there, and the other one has to retreat. That's still a local thing, but it gives you good positions for scoring, particularly around monuments. On a really and truly global level, we will then and now see the external conflict. And for this, I would suggest that we leave our little kingdom down in the lower left-hand corner of the board and move to the other side of the board, where we see two big kingdoms on the right side.
There we are.
But before I jump into these specific examples, let me say some sentences about the general strategy and philosophy behind the external conflict. An internal conflict I associate with just a little power struggle between two leaders in an otherwise stable kingdom. And therefore, religion will decide who is the true leader. Now, this is very different if you have two fully developed big kingdoms, as we see them on the board, and suddenly these two kingdoms come together. They are joined together, and suddenly you get a multitude of leaders in these kingdoms, and there are lots of conflicts, because suddenly you see that the merchants are the same, and that the kings even are the same, so you have two or even more of these in the same kingdom. And that causes a very different conflict. It is no longer decided on religion, but it now goes to the basis of the kingdom as such, and therefore each of the leaders will call on his supporters on his side and try to resolve that conflict according to his supporters and being stronger in his supporters. What does that specifically mean? Let's look at this example with these two kingdoms on the right side of the board. What we'll do is we'll assume that somebody plays on his turn two tiles. The first tile he plays is a blue farming tile, just in the lower kingdom, just on this river corner there, which leads up to the blue potter in the upper kingdom.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so what will happen from this blue tile is simple scoring, that the blue leader, which is the lion, will pick up 1 blue point. And now in the second activity of the player, he plays another tile, and it doesn't really matter which one, but just let's take one specific one. We put a green one in there. We put the green one, which now links the two kingdoms between the just placed blue tile and the blue potter. Now, as soon as this happens, we see that the two kingdoms are joined, and therefore we place our unification tile onto that spot. And that means this tile does not score because it has a very different meaning. It links these two kingdoms.
Yeah, now you have one big kingdom and you've got problems.
Exactly. And in this case, we have got two problems because the two blue leaders are in conflict and the two black leaders are in conflict. And of course, it could be much worse because if in the upper kingdom there were even more leaders in there, we could have even had more conflicts. And these conflicts are resolved very differently now, because we are now looking at the resolution of the conflicts through the respective colors in the tiles. That means if you look specifically at, let's say, the blue conflict, then the potter in his old upper kingdom has 4 blue tiles in there. So he has a strength of 4. Whereas if you look at the blue lion in the lower kingdom, the blue lion now also has 4 blue tiles in there because we just placed one before linking it up.
Exactly.
So that means they are of equal strength in this specific case. Again, if we resolve such a conflict, then the attacker, and that's either the player who played and is involved in the conflict, or clockwise the first player who is involved in the conflict, the attacker goes first and can play blue tiles from his screen, in front of his screen, to support his leader. So let's assume that these activities were actually done by the lion. Makes lots of sense, because the lion would have scored the first point anyway for placing the blue tile on the river, and then he links it up because he has the hope that he will actually kick out the blue potter in the upper kingdom and therefore will be the leader in the whole kingdom. So the lion, therefore, is the attacker. The lion would go first, and if he, for example, played 3 more blue tiles from his hand, then he would have a total strength of 7. And that means the blue potter will have to go if he cannot match this strength. The defender always has to match or be better. That means, because we are in a basic situation 4-4, the blue potter would also have to play at least 3 blue tiles from his hand. If he can do that, then the blue lion would have to disappear together with all his supporters. So assuming that it happens and the blue potter wins, that would mean not only does the blue lion leader go, but also the 4 tiles, the 3 which are in a row over the blue leader, a blue lion, and the one which was placed in order to get the connection, these tiles would all be removed.
Well, what that does, it seems to me, is there's no longer a link. There's no longer any conflict.
That is absolutely true. Now, the immediate consequence out of this removal of the 5 pieces from the board means that the victorious blue leader, which is the potter, would score 5 blue points. And that is, of course, an enormous increase in his score. So if we link that back to internal conflicts for a moment, in the internal conflicts, we were fighting over religion, but all that was removed from the board was the one leader, nothing else. And therefore, we get 1 red point. In the external conflict, that's very important. In the external conflict, we are not fighting over religion, we are fighting over the true colors, and all our supporters are involved in the conflict. And whichever side loses not only the leader, but also all the tiles of the supporting color. And for each tile removed from the board and each leader removed from the board, the victorious leader scores 1 point in that color.
Okay, now, not only have we eliminated any more conflicts or any need to resolve any further conflict, we have 3 kingdoms now.
Exactly.